Hey everyone, sfreezy back for a new video archetype for this channel. We're doing our first set review, this time for Final Fantasy. If you're like me, Universes Beyond and just Wizard's desire for quarterly profits in general has really made keeping up with Magic content harder, but we will strive onward together, and I've compiled for you all the cards that will actually matter for Final Fantasy, mostly for Commander and some for Modern. We're going to dive right in with the Wooburg order, as well as what Commanders get absolutely massive upgrades from this set, and then we'll jump into the colorless lands and Commanders. Buckle up, fam. This video is going to be a long one, but at the same time, I want to provide you with insight onto the cards I think are actually going to be useful for you in Commander and your deck building, so I'm going to do my best to do that. So starting off in white, the obvious, easiest to include in any deck is Restoration Magic. For 1 mana, it's Heroic Intervention for 1 permanent. For 2 mana, it's the same effect, but you gain 3 life. And for 5, just kidding, don't cast it for 5. If you would cast it for 5, don't own this card. It is a net positive as it's just an option, but definitely not an efficient use of your mana. The Wind Crystal is arguably one of the weakest of this crystal cycle, but it's still very powerful. In incremental life gain decks are better options, but the deck is 1 and 2 colors and gains chunks of life. This card's great because it doubles. The whole cycle has the upside of having a 6 mana effect stable to it if you can tap it and activate the effect. However, this one is one of the weakest. I do think having the upside is a reason to run these over the medallions. You can run both, but there is definitely a conversation for running these because they do have additional effects outside of just the cost reduction, whereas medallion late in the game does actual nothing. This can be a real card if you draw it later in the game. That said, at 6 mana, that's not what I want to be paying for this effect. Cloud Midgard Mercenary is a straight up auto include in any equipment deck. It tutors for an equipment and then it doubles the triggers of your equipments. This card is a must in those decks. I don't think it's a commander. This is great in the 99, however. And not just for equipment decks. I'm a big Skull Clamp aficionado and I run this card to get Skull Clamp. I think that one toughness even combos with Skull Clamp. You're welcome. In editing, it dawned on me Skull Clamp will trigger twice when you equip it to Cloud. So you draw 4 cards. Now for our first big fat saga, Summon Knights of Round. 6 and 2 white for a 3/3 indestructible creature saga. And chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 create 3 2/2 white knight tokens. And chapter 5 will basically be GG for your opponents because each creature controls plus 2% of the turn and they get indestructible counters. So this will make literally 24 power plus itself, and then it will pump them to be a massive 48 power on board across 5 turns. Yes, this is across 5 turns, but this is a great reanimation target. It's also insane in decks like Gen where they can just floop enchantments in and out. This card is going to see Commander play, and I'm honestly very excited for it. Plus, these are all knights for your Night Tribal commanders. As like a top end, this card is sweet. Definitely for Shadar Jabari, possibly, like a Knight Reanimator shell. And then lastly, all these sagas are great with Heliod's Hall of Generosity, put them back on top of your deck. So even when it goes away, you can just cast it again the next turn. Ultima is a new wrath that ends the turn, which means you can ignore Aristocrat's death triggers, and if you can find a way to give this flash, or maybe just use Quicken, or 3 fairy, you can make your opponents have a really bad time. Notably, it hits artifacts and creatures, but Aristocrats decks can just sack their board in response, people can sack treasures in response, crack clues, etc. That said, I think this is generally worse than Farewell, unless you give it flash, and even then, I would only just run this in addition to Farewell, not instead of Farewell. That being said, Modern Control players are going to love this, and I absolutely hate that. Minwu White Mage, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names, but there's probably more of that to come, is a solid cleric life gain commander, given that all the Soul Sisters are themselves clerics. So for all the Soul Sisters players whose decks are now useless because Modern is power crept so far, you have a commander now. Enjoy. Machinist Arsenal is yet another equipment piece this set has to offer. All the job select pieces eliminate the main problem with equipments of being do-nothing cards, albeit at the cost of mana efficiency. This seems worse than Nettlecyst, but again, this is a second Nettlecyst for your equipment deck, so of course you're going to run it. And each of those cards is better than the next equipment combined, so you run both to mitigate the giant functional problem of Ultron decks. What do you do if you only draw equipment? Being a tutorable threat's also nice with either Stoneforge or Sealscraper's Gifts, or even the new Cloud. And this will pump the creature makes or become attached to nearly astrological levels. It counts auras and equipments, and it's +2/+2. This thing will hit hard. Rugal's Valor is interesting. It's a 5 mana instant that, in my mind, is different but better than Inkshield because you can always just cast these if no one's attacking you to get the tokens, and it protects your board in the case of a Wrath while also doubling your board. You could also swing out Feign being unprotected and get surprise blockers out of nowhere. It also stops removal spells. This card has its use. I think even outside of token strategies, if you go white and white, this card's worth considering. I don't think it's a high powered card, but I think it's a cool card to exist, and I may try in some decks. Lastly, for white, I have my sleeper pick. Zac Fair is a great support creature for toolbox decks. 1 white, it enters with a 1 counter on it. It's a 0/1, so it becomes a 1/2. For 1 mana, you can sacrifice it. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Put Zac Fair's counters on that creature and attach an equipment that attaches Zac Fair to that creature. So this will let you save a creature. It can let you equip a creature with something that's on something else as a 1-drop. It's easy to respond to removal with when you cord for it, possibly even for free because it only costs 4 and you need 1 mana up to use the effect. It can be grabbed with Ranger Captain of Eos or Ranger of Eos as well. This card does a little bit of like a lot of cool things things. I'm pretty excited for it. Now for black. These cards are always much more exciting to me in Spoiler Season, especially this go around where white was almost exclusively removal, equipment, or life gain. Black, I am slightly biased. Some of my favorite colors in Magic. That being said, these cards put the white cards to shame. So let's get right into it. Most importantly, we have another black card to quote unquote answer enchantments. Is it specific? No. But does it have flexibility? Yes. And it's each player. So timed right, you can get up to 3 enchantments destroyed by one card in black, which is ridiculously great. If you told Richard Garfield this back in 1990, he would have slapped you across the face. But here we are in 2025, and black gets an ETB creature that kills enchantments. Gaius Van Belceris, again, sorry for the names, is a 4-drop that comes with the body and is either a non-token creature edict, a token edict, any token, or enchantment edict for all players. Notably, this is the first time it's appeared on a mono-black creature, and since black is the main color of recursion, we finally have what I would call a suite of enchantment removal in black. This is going right in my CDC deck, and I'm getting spare copies for all my black decks for the foreseeable future. This card is amazing. Get this card, if nothing else, from the set. Poison the Water seems like a great modern sideboard card for energy or combo decks, and that dichotomy is sweet. I mostly mean the Samwise combo, it only has creatures or artifacts, but also Storm if you're on the play, and if they empty the warrants, you can shrink the gobos. The Final Days is also right at home my CDC deck or any other creature-based self-mill strategy. Also goes right into Deval, which is basically the newer, more powerful version of Sidisi. The Darkness Crystal is much more potent than the white one, gaining you life and more importantly, turning off opponents' aristocrat decks and death triggers. And black as the color lacks natural ramp outside of coffers and certain rituals, so it benefits more from reduction. Plus, it has more card draw to use that reduction as well. This seems like a perfect fit for the Crick Son of Yawgmoth decks for sure, where both life gain and reduction of generic costs are great, and this adds a devotion for the inevitable Grey Merchant of Asphodel and is a black spell for Crick himself. So definitely, if you have a Crick deck, this goes right in. Vincent Valentine is a 4-mana version of Thraximundar and mono black, which is a complete combo with Darkness Crystal, so if you build the deck, don't include the previous card. However, this is a great threat in the command zone if you like punching with commander damage, and when it transforms, it keeps all the counters it accrues, meaning you have trample lifelink on a giant body, and then once it transforms, if it dies, you go back to your wimpy little dude. The commander is interesting, we'll probably do fine in bracket 2. Alright, now here come the bangers. Honestly, I am biased. I could build like 10 mono black commander decks and not have enough. Now for a high powered mono black commander or card 99 of any aristocrat's deck, we have Sephiroth Fallen Soldier. 3-mana 3/3 that when it enters or attacks, you can sack a creature, draw a card. That alone would have been a fine commander. Then it's also a blood artist with a reasonable body, but only for your creatures. And finally, if the blood artist effect happens 4 times, it flips and gives you the same ability as an uninteractable emblem that you keep for the rest of the game. If it's your commander and you recast it, or you get Malachite Rebirth to reanimate it, or just regular reanimate, or unearth because it only costs 3 mana, these emblems will stack. Then when it attacks, you can sacrifice any number of creatures, draw them any card. This commander wants things like Endrixar, Master Breeder, Bitter Blossom, the Ophiomancer, stuff like that. Honestly, I may build this. This guy looks sick. I also think he could be a spicy include in modern Yawgmoth decks, but I haven't seen one of those in a while. Xenos Yay Galvus is another insane new mono commander. ETB and infest the board, save for himself and one opponent's creature. Then, if the chosen creature dies, he flips over, so, pack removal in your mono black deck. It becomes a flying 8/8 for 5 mana, which is monstrous. You can just play it, shrink the board, and snuff out. And so on turn 5, you get an 8/8 flyer in mono black. You also choose a player to aim all your attention at, and when they die, you win the game. Notably, all it will take are 3 hits of your flying 8/8 commander. This guy is also super sweet and gives the murdered tribal deck a way to actually win the game, as well as giving me decision paralysis because now I don't know which mono black commander to build. The hits keep on coming from mono black. Zodiarch Umbral God is another massively powerful commander for mono black. This one packing 5 pips of devotion for Gary and indestructible out the gates. Not to mention, when he ETBs, each player sacrifices half their non-gods rounded down, so Maskwood Nexus is great here. And whenever a player sacrifices a creature, he grows. This can quickly be a lethal threat, and when it enters, it will murder half the board, including yours, so be careful. Maybe you run like tribal black gods like Erebos and Bantu with this guy, and you could throw in some changelings as well, just to get the creature count up. One way this is super sick is if you have the land, the World Tree, that you pay 10 mana and get all the gods you control from your deck on the battlefield. This will hit. Your opponents will sack half their board, and you'll have a whole board full of gods. Black also has its own crazy saga creature in Summon Primal Odin. ETB kills something, then it gets 1 attack as Phage, where it can end a single player, then you draw 2. Realistically, this will kill something and often eat a removal spell or get chump block, and that's okay. If your opponents just rolled over and died, the game wouldn't be fun. If it gets chump block but survives, they'll draw another 2 cards. Another great card to throw in Gen, though. Honestly, I may build Gen right now because all these new saga creatures are insane. Lastly is Black Mage's Rod. This goes right in Black X Spellslinger decks, especially things like Obnexilus. Job Select is excellent. It's almost a functional mirror to Living Weapon, but we'll take it. It's a good effect. That wraps up Black. Blue has less overly powerful cards, but they're still pretty interesting. I like Check's Notes. Keystes Trepe, and again, names, sorry, is a sorcery speed snapcaster for additional mana, but it can target any player's grave. That's kind of nice. Summon Leviathan is another mass bounce that will go in all Leviathan Kraken decks, but this time includes Merfolk as well, an archetype that probably didn't need this effect, but we've got to have it. In addition to mass bounce your opponent's creatures, it's also a 6/6 ward 2 for 6, a coastal piracy effect. The thought of this in every Merfolk typo deck, top end, keeps me up at night. Astrologian's Planisphere is a great equipment for prowess decks to trigger prowess, but then also give a body that benefits from prowess, like Stormcatcher's Talent. This is even better as it will also be equipable to your other creatures if the job select token dies. This is worse than Corey Steelcutter, but I could see a day where modern prowess runs both to maximize on threats without sacrificing its non-creature slots to do so. Louis Soix's sacrifice is overrated. If you aren't playing CDH or have a ton of legends you want to die in blue, don't run it. Flare of Denial exists, and it's literally free if you sacrifice any non-token blue creature, which is much more common than a legend, and counters any spell. Stifle exists at 1 mana already for half the effect. This card costs 3 without the sacrifice, so pretty much unplayable, and Disallow once again counters any spell for the same mana cost. This card is getting hype. It doesn't deserve, in my opinion. I would play Disallow if the Stifle counterspell hybrid is what I was looking for, and for a cheap counterspell, hands down I would take Flare of Denial. This card does exist though, I'll give it that, and in CDH still probably run it. Rogue Rack being free is definitely great for this card, as well as a lot of players having 4-color partner good stuff piles with 2 legends in the command zone. But if you're not playing CDH, which is probably most of my viewers, don't run this card. It also lacks blowout potential that Flare of Denial has because you have to hold up a blue mana, which is still Swan Song mana. The only place I would run this outside of CEH is in 2 commanders. 1, Venser Corpse Puppet. It has Lifelink Toxic 1, but most importantly, it creates a legendary token, the Hollow Sentinel, whenever you proliferate. Or an Inquisitor Eisenhorn, who also makes a legendary token whenever you reveal your first instant or sorcery drawn per each turn. So these can make repeatable legends. They can run this card and no one else. The Water Crystal is absurdly powerful in the right deck. It's going right into the Mind Skinner. This effect is more narrow and won't go into most blue decks, unlike the rest of the crystals, but there are combos that exist with it to outright win the game, and Bruvac, Fenax, and the Mind Skinner would love some new toys. Realm Sketching can make a copy of an artifact, creature, or land, so it has insane utility. Just don't complain out of someone who's representing generous gift or beast within for your lands. I'm a big fan of copying powerful permanents, but the clones that enter as a copy, in my opinion, are much better and don't give a window to respond to targeting. Rook Turret seems okay enough in a deck looking to win with Mirrored and Besiege, but not many other places. Memories Returning being a sorcery is a little bit of a bummer, but I love these types of your opponent splits cards, this one offering a unique twist. While this is probably still unplayable in 1v1 with the timing restriction, this actually gets better in Commander with Collusion. If you and another player have a mutual problem, this can help you find an answer. So I do like this card a lot in the Commander, not at all in control decks in 1v1. As a Commander, the most interesting in blue is Ultros Obnoxious Octopus, basically a Spellslinger deck that will delay opponents early and then cast Haymakers while trying to punch with a commander can get huge. Not super interesting or unique, but it could definitely have a reasonable deck behind it, and there are ways to cheat with cards CMCs. Black got an enchantment hate this set. Red also got a new toy. To deal with the One Ring, Suplex. Depending on your bracket, the One Ring can be a very annoying card for you, especially in red decks where damage prevention's super annoying as well. And red got Suplex to exile it or pick off a small creature. Not an amazing card, but hitting the One Ring gives us an honor over a Braid in my book. Though, to be fair, I have not run a Braid in pretty much any commander deck in a good minute. Red Mage's Rapier is another tool for prowess decks as a non-creature that is also a prowess type threat. Opera Love Song is another instant speed exile effect for Mono Red Storm in Modern, or another card to slot into Prosper or any of these Exile Matters decks. Also Faldorn. Niflheim of Flame generally seems worse than Chandra's Ignition, but it's a redundant copy, and this one has flashback. Not to mention, when you flash it back, you loot your hand for 4 cards. That said, Ignition ends the game, so you don't need to dirtle around at 11 total mana or even draw cards, so take that with a grain of salt. Zeldinch is missing green in his color identity to be a successful commander, but seems exciting in the 99 of any red-green X landfall deck, and absolutely necessary in any landfall deck outside of green. Safer Almasi is also interesting in theory, but in practice I don't think will be effective. A simple chump blocker counters everything he wants to be doing, and he gets double strike when attacking alone, so what he wants to be doing is antithetical to Red's general swing out and worry about the consequences later strategy. The Fire Crystal is one of the most powerful crystals in the set, and it's going right into Tali. The Haste Enabler for only 1 additional mana off rate is sweet. When you consider the first spell you cast, the discount gives you that back as a rebate. Then for 6, get the additional option, and again, it's an additional option. This is added utility to make a copy of something, so in Tali this is perfect. The base effect of Haste is the way we want it, but the copy that will have Haste is also excellent. This is my pick for the most playable cycle, followed by black and then green. Lastly, for red, Sabotender is the cheapest version of the landfall deal 1 damage to each opponent card, and so definitely worth running in landfall decks. We'll try it as a trap card. I think a lot of players are going to run this thinking it'll give them free cards, and if your CMC is higher than your opponent's, it will. If not, you could get actual nothing, so be very careful. And at a minimum, you do get your own card, but that's all. And for 6 mana, it's not a good rate. A Gruul big stuff deck with library manipulation that cares about exile, like specifically Atali wants this card and not much else. I'm not even going to run an Atali. That deck is already very tight, and the upkeep thing really bothers me. If this happened end step, maybe we're talking, but upkeep, no chance. If I have to wait a full turn cycle and then it turns out my 6 drop was actually Phyrexian Arena, no thank you. That's it for red. Green has landfall synergies and bird stuff and not much else. That said, it still has some decent cards this go around. Saj Chocobo is a 1-drop with landfall that puts a counter on itself, great in things like Odama of the West Tree, another landfall and counter synergy decks. Summon Fenrir is a ramp spell that comes with a temporary body, pumps your next creature, and can even draw you a card. Great for Selvala, Galta, Drizzt Do'Urden, Gitrog, Ravenous Ride, and other Power Matters decks. Clash of the Icons is a fight spell for commanders who want that, but it's also a great spell for playing with counters on sagas, so Tom Bombadil are going to love this, all for a single green mana. Torgal is a 2-mana rainbow dork that pumps the first human you play each turn for amount of wolves you have, so at least one, hopefully more. Excellent for Fowler decks or human type decks that support green. If you're Bant, possibly Lear and Catilda. Jumbo Cactar is super hype for its 10,000 power. Watch out for this in conjunction with instant speed, fling stuff. It's not a great card, but it can kill a player or two if it attacks one first. Don't let them give it trample. If you see this, kill it with fire. Because realistically, if your opponent's running this, they want to kill you with it. They're going to have trample, they're going to have removal for your blockers. Be careful. Summoner's Grimoire is an improved Elvish Piper. Find it, cheat stuff into play, and you can re-equip it. You need to have a very high curve to make this card actually be worth running. However, if you do, this card's great. You can re-equip it to a creature that can already attack to give it pseudo haste, or you can just give it haste in green or red. But with haste or the ability to equip immediately, this card becomes much, much better. Notably great with the new Massive Sagas, they come to play tapped and attacking. Traveling Chocobo is good outside of Bird's decks, though it obviously goes in those. Double landfall and bird triggers, as well as the Corsair Prefix Land with the top ability is no joke. The MH3 set designers really wanted Eldrazi and Boros, and the Final Fantasy set designers really want birds. Summon Titan is great for graveyard-based landfall strategies, aka all of them. We're going to jam Realm Reborn and Big Mana decks, but I won't be one of them. This card will definitely win games, but why not just run Titanium's Command on 6, or Cultivator Colossus on 7, or cards that win the game by themselves? It's not what I would like to play, but it is a card that is powerful in its own way. That being said, in my mind, there's much better things to do with your mana than just to spend it to make a bunch of mana next turn. Even if I wanted this effect specifically, I would take Bootlegger Stash over this. A card that I would only really play in Beladros decks or decks that untap your lands to make more mana, or decks of Seaborn Muse, but at least the treasures let you store that mana for later. Cryptolith Right also does the same thing, but only for creatures for 2 mana. And realistically, the adding stuff any colors doesn't really matter that much because your lands should be pretty fixed in your decks anyway, especially in green. I know 3 mana is a huge difference, but I would much rather run Reshape the Earth and get landfall triggers, Field of the Dead, a bunch of zombies, and then be less susceptible to being blown out than play an enchantment that could just die before my next turn and just wait and pray. TLDR, at pretty much any spot on the curve, this card has a better alternative to run, so don't run this card. I don't get why people aren't high on the green crystal, the earth crystal. It has the same cost reduction effect, but it doubles the number of pulse encounters you put on creatures. This effect is great, and they stack, and you want as many of this as you can possibly get. And the 6-mana ability isn't amazing, but you don't need it. You run it for the first half. That's just gravy. Every pod's got that one guy that doubles tokens, or doubles counters, or doubles damage, and if you ask them if this card is good, I guarantee you they already have 3 copies. Colorless mostly has Bahamut as an insane reanimated target / card for Gen, and Buster Sword for equipment decks. Bahamut's also a nice new top end card for the colorless decks. Buster Sword is not only sweet for equipment decks, but it's also nice for low to the ground aggro decks that have a mid to low CMC curve. This will pump even to 1-drops power to at least 4, and then you can cast pretty much any card in your deck if you draw it. So there's that. And then in multicolored, we have a slew of commanders. Vivi is great in the 99 of any Spellslinger and an insane commander. This one's the low-hanging fruit. This card looks busted. Kuja looks like he'd make a sweet black wizard type of Spellslinger deck commander. I'm a sucker for commanders who flip, and I like doing direct damage to all opponents. The wizards being black combos with cards like IR First of Locthwain, and then any non-creature is amazing. You can run things like Impact Tremors and trigger everything. And when they come in, they trigger again. This card is going to do tons of damage. Garland seems interesting in 99, and a Modern Rakdos list is a 5th Dragon Rage Channeler. I look forward to trying this as a fun of and maybe replace one of the extra Croxus in Rakdos Delirium. But to me, this stands out as more of a modern card than a commander card. However, Golbez Crystal Collector, who may be related to him, I'm not actually sure about the lore, but it's very similar looking card. It's just 10 times cooler. It's Dimir for a 1/4 legendary creature human wizard. Whenever artifact you control enters, surveil 1, which is already great. It doesn't count spells cast, it's any artifact, so you can just get a bunch of treasures, surveil 1 a bunch of times. At the beginning of your end step, you control 4 more artifacts, return target creature card from your to your hand. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts, each opponent loses life because that card's power. So this is an amazing Artifacts Matter commander. It's a graveyard commander. This is the one from this set that I am most likely to build. This card is sweet. It also only costs 2 mana, so if it dies, you can play it again, and it gets you card advantage. Cloud Planet Champions, another Boros equipment commander, though not a particularly unique one. I'm biased. I don't like equipment-based decks, but the Naya one is much cooler. Cloud X Soldier. Giving green is great. It seems very powerful for a equipment-based deck, but those decks are usually inherently flawed. Sephiroth, Planet's Heir, is a sweet commander for people who want to play control, but also want a fast clock to win the game. Absolute Virtue is definitely a trap. It is not as untouchable as it looks at first glance, but it's a solid threat in the 99. I would not make this your commander. You'll be pretty sad when it dies to a Wrath. This is at its best use a big Chongus Reanimator target. It's going straight in my Rafine deck. Joshua Phoenix's Dominant looks really interesting as a Boros card. Sorry, a Lorehold card. Unlike the rest from this set, he's more in line with the Strixhaven, Graveyard, Recursive Boros, and equipment stuff, and it's refreshing and even looks powerful. However, all the dominants have the massive downside of your opponents being able to remove them in response to activation. These are mostly reserved for bracket 2 or 1, done. Any deadly relic, swords to plowshares, or stuff is going to end your whole career after you spend 8 total mana trying to cast and flip this. Grixis Kefka looks like an interesting, grindy, control, value-based deck, but I already have Sauron, and I'm not going to build 2 Grixis decks. It also has the same blow-up problem as all the dominance. However, this one does get blue to at least interact, but it's still 8 mana at sorcery speed. That's going to be a yikes for me, dog. If you must play these, be careful. Tella, Great Sage, seems interesting at first, but you do sacrifice it when you cast a high CMC spell and deal damage. Kind of a disincentive to build it unless the spell is massive, but then you're probably going to win anyways. So why run this over Vivi? As a commander, it's less flexible to be built, and it's also just less powerful. So if you're going to run this, just run Vivi. Judge Master Gabrinth isn't a commander, but it's great in Universal Cast 99. Black Waltz number 3 is another spellslinger. Flying Death Touch Gutter Snipe in the command zone. Seems decent, but not super interesting, and it definitely seems almost strictly worse than the Kuja. In the same set, there's a lot of Final Fantasy cards taking strays from Final Fantasy cards, and especially in the same color pairing, I would not run this over Kuja. Garnet is another sweet Saga piece, either as a powerful commander damage commander in a Saga deck, or more likely going into Tom Bombadil. There are only so many Sagas, and limiting the color by selection and not having indestructible is definitely a nod in Tom's favor. Viridia's Summoner Mist is a Gruul version that also loots, which is pretty cool and you can reanimate sagas. However, it's just, again, in red green only, Tom seems better. Viridia is your girl from Final Fantasy. I get it. Build your commander, do you. I just think in general, Tom is a much stronger choice and more flexible. Choco, Seeker of Paradise is the best commander if you're super into birds. Noctis, Prince of Lucis is a sweet recursive or Grey Red artifact style commander. This one is kind of open-ended and one of the more interesting commanders in the set. I've always liked lifelink stapled to a payoff that requires paying life. Sid, Timeless Artificer is another rule-breaking type card and also a commander. So this one is definitely interesting. Of the commanders in this set, this is the one I'm most looking forward to seeing in the wild. X-Death Void Warlock doesn't seem like a commander to me, but I would look forward to seeing him in the 99 of a lot of graveyard-based decks, especially permanent-based ones, and I may even try to modern. 3 mana in black is that sweet spot for Unearth, and I have a White of the Reliquary Zombieland deck that would love to play this. So Wizards, once again, thank you for pushing the envelope. Now this set has the most unique land cycle we've seen since they first introduced MDFCs, which I'm a huge fan of. I think each of these save the blue in a generic deck is worth considering if you don't already have a lot of tap lands. The green can go in basically any deck as either a tap land or it makes a sizable threat. The blue goes in any mill deck, but it's so narrow, so probably nowhere else. Nobody this is any player. The animator deck can mill itself. I'd run it there too. The white one is okay in artifact or enchantment decks. And remember, this is all added utility, but this is probably the weakest in a generic deck after blue. Don't cut lands for these, cut weaker spells, and make sure you always hit your land drops. You'll be glad you did. The red is actively good in spell slingers, so it gives extra reach. It's instant speed and a spell itself, but as red's primary color play purpose is akin to the instruction on a claymore, point front towards enemy, this can go in pretty much any red deck. Black is again excellent because aristocrats is probably what you're doing already. You're going to have fodder to pay off your deck anyway. These are also great in Faldorn as the land half will enter from exile, so I would run both the green and red in those decks. These have the added benefit of not making you flip the card around on the sleeve, so I almost strictly prefer these already. Eden, Seed of the Sanctum is also excellent, and colorless, so it can go in any deck, and you sacrifice the land, and you get a regrowth. After milling 2 cards, but only for permanents, at instant speed no less. This is going right in my Bellajo's Witherbloom deck as a way to get back a card, instant speed, and that 5 mana becomes more of a life cost than a mana cost. And then also, Clive's Hideaway has the Hideaway ability, so you ETB, check the top 4, put 1 exile on each card, and for 2 and tap, you can play the extra card paying its mana cost. If you control 4 more legendary creatures, which is not trivial, but in certain decks, you can definitely have that accomplished pretty easily. You don't lose the land, it is card advantage, but you really want to make use of that reduction in mana cost to 2. If your deck is pretty cheap anyway, maybe don't run this card, it's not worth it. But if your deck has a bunch of 7, 8, 9 cost cards, this card becomes much better. Hideaway also ignores timing restrictions, so if you have a card like Wrath, they swirled and white from this set, Ultima, you can both break timing restrictions and friendships by ending your friend's turn. That wraps up my first set review. I look forward to doing more of these in the future. Maybe some will even be universes within. If there are cards not included, it's not to say that they are bad, just that these are the cards I find the most interesting and are powerful from the set. The set is legal in every format save pre-modern, so if you aren't the biggest fan of Universes Beyond, you can find solace there, though it is most likely to make waves in Commander, then Standard, then Modern in that order. If you liked the video and want to see more content from me, I have a lot of deep dive deck techs where I break down certain commanders that I think are cool and give a detailed description of cards that go into the deck and how you can build them with a fully explained rationale behind card choices and cards that are good and are bad. And on my channel, there's a poll for you to check out when you're liking and subscribing because it's going to be the next deck we do. Coming soon, I'm going to start a deck building bootcamp series of videos to help with general deck building knowledge, and I'm going to start recording Modern, Pre-Modern, and Commander with friends for some gameplay content for y'all. Remember to stay frosty out there and keep on brewing.